Serious teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? Student created a bobby trap like card for another teacher's birthday that, when opened, shot out sharpened, unfolded paper clips. I was stunned by how ingenious of an invention it was. Few years back I taught 2nd grade. An 8-year-old boy would always bring little treats for me in the morning like candy, a cookie or even these tiny animal toys. This one morning he came to my desk and told me he had a gift for me. He opened his bag and pulled out a big brassiere and gave it to me. I was speechless, took it and put it in a drawer and just said thank you. Called in his mom and told her about this. Kid never gave me gifts again. My mother is a middle school teacher, so she's got some stories, but this one from this fall is quite scary. As a class were getting new assigned seats and waiting at the front of the classroom while the teacher reads out names and seats, a girl, who was pretty quiet but not exactly loner status, stabbed a boy in the back with a pair of scissors completely unprovoked. She jabbed him deep enough to puncture a lung and somehow, this kid didn't notice. It wasn't until 10 to 15 minutes later, when he asked to use the restroom and another teacher saw the back of him soaked in blood. They figured out what happened and who did it. Police were called, and she was taken to a children's facility. My mother stopped in at the end of the day to chat with the principal about the incident, and what the principal described was quite disturbing. She apparently sat there the entire time the police were talking to her about what she did and why she did it, and she had absolutely no remorse. She sat there and nodded. No tears. Gave no reason why she did it. Was told she would be going into a children's facility. Nothing. No reaction. Just sat there staring. This wasn't revenge for something this boy did. They weren't friends and my mom said he's the sweetest thing who enjoys his small group of friends in Pokemon. She did this completely randomly. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God, but according to mom it was not loose. He just sat at his desk and grabbed it and yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said he wasn't able to read anymore, so could he just put his head down. He was sent to the nurse and mom was horrified. I had a girl who couldn't be in the classroom and had to be on a 1:1 with me at all times. But she couldn't be in the classroom because she was extremely violent and deliberately stabbed another child in the eye with a colored pencil, then laughed about it. The other child had to be hospitalized. When we asked her why she did it, she started laughing again and said because I wanted to. She would also randomly attack kids on the playground and in the halls. When they put her on a 1:1 with me and she couldn't do that anymore, she started attacking me on a daily basis. She was 4. Crushed a bird in his fist. 7th grade, this super fricked up kid I knew picked up a pencil and without provocation straight up stabbed the teacher's pet dove to death. A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter. Immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter right out of his hands and said quit being an asshole, then sat right back down for the lesson to continue. Edit. Thank you so much for the gold, kind stranger. If I knew where the big kid went on to after middle school I'd share it with him. Recently had one of my students tell a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that, she's pregnant." The first student then said, "That's the point. These are 5th graders." This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems, so this was quite a shock. I caught some kid trying to take inappropriate photos of his lady friends in the class. When I noticed him doing something fishy, he was directly aiming the camera to where the female students were sitting. I told him to hand over the phone, and he got visibly uncomfortable but complied. I handed it over to his form tutor, who was a lady, and explained the situation. I figured if there were any photos of female students it wouldn't be okay for me to see it. First sweep through his documents didn't reveal anything, but luckily I thought of suggesting her to check the hidden category and am told everything was in there. School took disciplinary action as a result. I was a teaching assistant for an EBD school. Had one of the students try to stab me in the throat with a knife repeatedly during class. No one gave a shoot, so I quit and moved on. I was a supervisor for a special program that involved about 20 students that were expelled from other schools. Most of them were known gang members. The program had a strict no bandana policy. One day kid 1m16 stole kid 2's M17 cigarettes while kid 2 was in an office session about his homework. We found out later that kid 1 thought it was hilarious and was laughing about it. Kid 2 goes for his smokes during break and can't find them. He proceeds to flip out and starts screaming about how he's going to frick someone up. No one admitted it. We de-escalated the situation and later took him to the store to buy a new pack for him. A few days go by and kid 1 gets ratted out by another student who was in the same gang as kid 2. We didn't know any of this was going on at the time. One afternoon during a group session we would have them sit in a circle during some lessons. Instead of at desks, out of nowhere these two boys jump up and yell "Yo kid 1" as they literally run at him and proceed to beat him up right in front of everyone until the staff broke it up. All 3 got expelled after that, and I have no idea what happened to them, although I can imagine some scenarios based on how committed they were to gang life. Edit. Us buying cigarettes for a minor is certainly a point of controversy as evidenced in the comments. A few people correctly pointed out that given the circumstances, it was the best decision at the time. It helped us calm him down, take him away from the tense environment, and offered us an opportunity to create a moment of trust building in adult figures, which we know he didn't have much of. The majority of those kids were daily smokers weed and tobacco, so this was not a moment to try and be authoritative about smoking. Cigarettes were a coping mechanism more than anything. These kids had really shitty lives overall. Cigarettes are a kind of stress relief for them. No one joins a gang because they grew up in a privileged environment. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching another kid, his friend, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he had never been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after. Had no idea what he did was weird or upsetting. I had a friend who would randomly get violent and wouldn't stop until someone else hit him back. I was in fights with him often and was basically his only friend because nobody else tolerated his behavior. He was a really nice guy when he wasn't acting up, and we hung out a lot. One time he got me by surprise though and shocked me against a wall, and I genuinely thought I might die until another friend and some adults could pull him off of me. I was afraid of him and wary for a while after that, but it was also the last time he got violent like that. We were friends 4 years after, until he randomly blocked my number and social media out of the blue. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife, if that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive sexual things, moon students on the bus, etc. But the predatory behavior was the worst. Head waiter students left the room so he could be next to last, turn off the light and backhand the last kid in line, often his own cousin who was his most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends, or force his cousin to do so in case they were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, so I'm not sure what happened to him. Sensitive material. Sorry if this upsets anyone. I am a special education teacher, and during my student teaching I had a lovely 16-year-old girl with Down syndrome. She was a quiet, reserved girl who often was not well groomed. This is something that we worked on with her at school. She was gaining weight and tired a lot, and was discovered that she had not had a period for several months. The school nurse examined her and realized she was nearly 6 months pregnant. After an investigation, her younger brother 11 years old was having sex with her and got her pregnant. I believe he went to a juvenile center. I moved out of the country, so I'm not sure whatever happened to her. I do know she gave birth and the baby was adopted. I always think about that girl oft. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I was doing group time singing songs, reading a book, and all the kids were sitting on the floor. One left to blow her nose. She came back, walked through the crowd of kids to get back to her spot, grabbed a quiet girl's hair, and kept walking. My assistant thought it was a mistake, but the girl kept walking. She even bent at the knees and yanked while the poor long-haired girl screamed. That girl had no remorse and would be so unpredictable. She would look in your eyes, but right through them. It was a stressful year. I have to that stand out. One, a student made a hit list and had numerous teachers and students on it too. I found a letter on the ground that an 8th grader had written that talked about being sexually abused by her uncle. I gave it to my principal and had to meet with the police to talk to them about the student and finding the letter. Edit. Wow. This is getting a lot more votes than I thought it would. Well, anyway, on a side note, before I got into teaching I was a youth fitness instructor and summer camp director at a non-profit, and I will add this story too. I worked with an 8th grader who clearly had some behavior problems. He would not follow any directions and did not work well with other kids. I was going to remove him from the program, but his aunt worked at the same place, so I gave him a second and third chance. When his behavior didn't change, I was forced to remove him. Years later I found out, randomly reading the news one day, that he and 2 other kids, by this time he was 19, had murdered another kid in town. Him getting a lot of comments ranging from "you did the right thing" to "my school had a kid who had a hit list too." He was a good kid who never hurt anyone. Point being, as an educator that is entrusted with the well-being and safety of 24 children at a time, my absolute #1 priority is to always provide a safe environment and follow all procedures related to threats or violence. No exceptions. One of my students' high school came in one day and handed me a pop vinyl figurine from one of her favorite bands. She said I could have it and I, not used to random gifts, asked her why she was giving it to me. She said something along the lines of she didn't need it anymore. I thanked her and told her to have a good day. The following day she killed herself. It immediately became clear why she didn't need the figurine anymore. That still bothers me. Edit. Thank you for the gold and platinum. Unnecessary, but appreciated. Also, thanks to everyone for the kind words. In retrospect, I knew this act was a sign that she was contemplating / preparing for suicide, but it didn't occur to me at that moment, and that haunts me. I hope she found peace. I'm a teacher at a language course. One student in particular is very challenging. He took his pants off twice, once in my co-worker class, once in my class. Both happened right after we yelled at him for being disruptive. Then it escalated. I was writing something on the board and the boys were giggling and laughing. I thought they were being silly as usual, but when I turned to face them, one of the boys told me that the challenging boy flashed them his penis. 2 weeks later he was running to the classroom, stopped in front of my manager and headbutted her breast. On the same day, he also planted his face on our janitor's bobs when she was trying to break up their fight. We have told his mom about this, and she said she would talk to him about the flashing incident, but not the headbutting, as she was sure he did not mean to do it. At the first school that I taught at, I had a girl come up to me one day and say, "Robert has a knife." I pulled Robert into the hallway to talk with him about it. He said that he didn't have a knife, but did have a box cutter. I asked him why he had it and he said, "Because I'm tired of Chris." Chris was an annoying suck-up, but wasn't really bad or mean to other kids. I asked Robert what he was planning on doing to Chris. He said, "I'm going to get him in the bathroom." I usually took the class to the restroom after lunch, but I didn't that day because they were being rowdy in the hallway. I took Robert to the office, and after hearing the story, the principal chewed him out. She then called Robert's mom, and she chewed him out on the phone. Here's the kicker. Robert knew that he was in serious trouble. He knew that what he was planning was wrong. He just didn't care. Not in a false bravado macho type was. He literally didn't care. I hate to predict a kid's future criminal endeavors, but that kid scares me. By the way, Robert was 8 years old at the time. I used to teach a PE class to 3 to 5-year-olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinder. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming for "who I can see you" at the top of his lungs while trying to punch, kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head, and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone he would scream with laughter, wearing the biggest shoot-eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy frick, I will never forget that kid. I taught 3rd graders for a year, so the kids were around 9 years old. It was a couple of days before summer holidays and I asked the kids what they were going to do during summer. I got to this one girl and asked her what she was going to do, and she happily announced she was going to Germany with her sister and parents. I asked her what she was going to do in Germany, and she said she was going to ask people if they have €1. I was like, what? And she proceeded to sit down on the floor with a really sad look on her face, stuck her hand out to me and said, "See, like this. Please miss, do you have just €1? I'm hungry." She didn't really see anything wrong with this. I'm pretty sure she didn't really understand what she was doing. I was quite alarmed by this, so I informed the other school staff. It turned out that, even though they weren't actually poor, her parents were regularly taking their 2 daughters to Germany over summer, where they would make them beg for money in the streets. I heard the girl and her sister got pulled out of school shortly after that, but I don't know what happened after, since I don't work there anymore. When I was doing student teaching, one of the girls in there would constantly shove her hand down her pants and dig around. I had been trying to work with her on this by discouraging it. One day when I was telling her not to do it, she pulled her hand out and wiped it down my arm. The smell about made me sick. Taught preschool for a couple years, had a 3-year-old in my class who was new to the school. He was cute as a button, the perfect blonde hair and bright blue eyes with rosy red cheeks. He was a nightmare. He used to just randomly get up and run around the room smacking other kids in the face. He got up one time to come over and punch me and my co-teacher in the stomach. I was able to stop him and put him in a hold that they taught us at my preschool. His parents acted like nothing was wrong. They refused to see that their child had serious issues. The final straw was one day during crafts. He was playing at a different center in the classroom and got up and ran towards a little girl I was helping. She had her back turned to him and he grabbed a triangle-shaped building magnet and stabbed her in the neck so hard it cut her. I have never reacted so quickly. I grabbed him up from behind by his arms and immediately walked him to the hallway and down to the main office. I was done. I told my director that he was either out of my class today or I quit. His parents withdrew him that day before we could start the process of expulsion. But my director still got him on some list that basically stays on his school record that he's had these outbursts. IDK what happened to him, but I'm sure I'll see him on the news someday. Today a 6-year-old boy in my class threatened to kill me just because I took his toy car out of his hand after asking him multiple times to put it away. He also trashed my desk looking for it, but luckily it was in my pocket. At an adult learning college, the student was getting paid by their employer to come to college and get their formal qualification. Their employer was upset that after 12 months, this guy hadn't passed any of their subjects. They complained to the college that there seemed to be a mistake. The first I knew of it was admin staff asking why he had failed so many classes. I didn't know who he was as he hadn't ever turned up or submitted any work over the 12 months. That's the first time I've been asked to show evidence of non-attendance. Apparently that's a thing.